As a former firefighter, I came to obsess a little bit with pensions. Before I left the fire service and went into the financial industry, I decided to review everything that was being provided when it came to the pension so that I could learn about it to make sure I was making the right choice for myself. Ultimately, what I ended up doing was getting out of the pension and rolling it into or taking the lump sum option. I'd only worked as a firefighter for 8 years. It was not an astronomical amount, but I started to do the calculations to figure out what makes the most sense for me and will pay me the most money later on down the road. Now, for you, that may not be the case. You may want to stick with the pension itself or go with the lump sum, but let's just go over some things with the pensions and how they work, what you should be looking for to make sure you're making the right choice for yourself. And so really, retirement prep with a pension, you really want to focus on a few things, and these are just different things to take away. It may not be everything, but understand your payout. That's going to be a big one we'll talk through. Liquidity, lump sum, and then tax liability, because tax liability is definitely one that can catch you by surprise if you don't plan for it. And so let's look at plan calculations. Every plan is going to be different on the way they calculate these. But this is just a base example. And what we're talking about here is, let's just say you have 30 years of service that you worked somewhere. There's a multiplier. They're usually going to have some sort of calculation to figure out what they're actually going to pay you. Usually that's going to incorporate in a multiplier. Let's just say that it's 2%. And then they're going to multiply that by, let's say, your highest 5 years. Sometimes it's your average years of service. Sometimes it's your highest 5, highest 3. It will vary when it comes to that and how they calculate that. And then once you have that calculation, they're going to say, okay, great. That's your single annuity payout or pension payout. That's what you're going to get based on those numbers. But you're like, well, what about my spouse? Well, if you want to provide for somebody else, they're going to start to decrease the payout that you are actually receiving. So it will be a reduced payout depending on what options you select. Sometimes you're going to see things like a 10-year guaranteed. So what that means is that for 10 years, it's guaranteed to pay out regardless if you die in year 1. But after the 10 years, it's done paying out. So let's just say that you live for 10 years and then you pass away on 10 years in one day. Well, whoever that spouse was that was hoping to get some of the pension is not going to get anything at that point. So be careful on how you're picking what your plan selection is when it comes to the actual pension payout. You'll have other options that may be out there, reduced benefits, where maybe you get the certain amount, and then if you were to pass away, the spouse would get 50% or 75%, or probably one of the lowest payouts you're going to get, but the best guarantee and bang for your buck could be having a joint payout where you would get 100%. In the event that maybe, let's just say that you're retiring and you're not in the best of health and you know there's a good possibility you're going to pass away in the next 10 years, but your spouse is doing great and you're thinking they're going to live another 30 or 40 years and you want to make sure they're taken care of, that 100% payout is a nice option there. Something you really want to focus on too when it comes to these plan calculations. Is there a cost of living adjustment or a COLA? So if there is not, what that means is that whatever you get, let's say you're retired age 60 and you're getting $50,000 a year, you're only going to get $50,000 a year the rest of your life if there's not any kind of adjustment. If there's an adjustment, oftentimes they're going to come back and they're going to make that adjustment and they'll increase based on either inflation or it's just a guaranteed fixed increase each year. Either way, that is a huge perk that you have to account for and you want to account for when it comes to the planning when you have a pension. So make sure that you're asking that question though, because that's going to be a key factor. Another thing that you really want to think through when it comes to these pensions is liquidity. If you have a pension and you're having $50,000 a year coming in, that is amazing. The problem with it is in retirement, oftentimes you're wanting to say, hey, you know what? I want to go live big. I've worked so hard my whole life. I want to make sure I'm living it up. Well, you might want to think about starting to make sure that you have another bucket of dollars to pull from so that you can live big at different times. If you have the steady pension coming in, that will mean that, okay, great, I've got a steady income always coming in just as I would a paycheck. But it may not allow you to really build a nest egg on the side because you're using all of those dollars to cover all of your expenses. So thinking through that a little bit, make sure that you're thinking through liquidity. This is just a chart that we use. This is off of a retirement planning software we call Nest Egg. And so I'm just giving you some examples here because you're going to have your general retirement expense like you're seeing in this scenario, and then you're going to have healthcare costs. But then potentially you're going to want a car. Maybe it's a car every 10 years or 5 years or whatever the case is, but that's a big expense. Sure, you could finance it, but if you're financing it, now that's cutting into everything on your monthly expenses that you're going to have to pay out. Then maybe you've got a child and you've got a wedding that's coming up, or maybe 2 children. Maybe you want to relocate. And then there's the unexpected expenses. If you are a homeowner, there's a good possibility that you're going to have things like a roof or an AC or a water heater, all of these things that are going to come into play. Now, yes, again, you could finance those, but then that's going to drop or reduce the amount that you have of liquidity on a monthly basis because now you're having to pay this out. So allowing yourself to build a nest egg through whether it be a 457, if you're working for the government, you have some sort of plan there, or a 403B as a teacher or an educator that you could potentially have as a separate side amount that you can build more liquidity that's not going to make you stick just with the pension. And then sometimes, even if you're in just the general employment out there, you could have a 401k, or you could have something like the TSP with the government, the federal government. Lots of different options here. I'm just encouraging you to make sure that you're not just focusing on just saying, hey, I'm just going to live it up while I live now. I'm guaranteed to have a pension and I'm not going to worry about the rest. Just make sure you're focusing on that. A lot of people are asking questions around the lump sum. The lump sum is a cool option, and it will depend on what is the best scenario for you. As I shared, I did take the lump sum when I left the fire department because the calculations just didn't make sense for me to get the pennies that I was going to receive years down the road. And so with the lump sum, I was able to invest those dollars, and then I'm able to grow those on my own with the hopes that I will have much more paying out, not on a guaranteed basis as a pension would, but I would at least hopefully have those dollars paying out later on. And now, so with the lump sum, some people like the option because, again, it allows you to have that liquidity. You do have to be careful, though, because now you will enter into the markets and have the market risk going up and down. Though sometimes it makes more sense to do that, especially if you don't have a cost of living increase. Because if you're retiring at 60 and you need to live till 90, and they're going to give you a certain amount a month, maybe you could do better by potentially investing this in the market and also adjusting for inflation. Or if, again, you're in maybe poor health, possibly you're not married, or even if you are married and maybe both of you are in bad health, you could consider the idea of taking the lump sum for the sake of leaving an inheritance later on, because a pension will pay you out. It will pay your spouse or sometimes the beneficiary out, whatever the dollars are that's needing to be paid out. But beyond that, it's gone. It's kind of like Social Security. Same kind of process there. So when it comes to the lump sum, the calculations will vary significantly on this. Every single company that's doing this or government agency that's doing this, that's calculating this, it's a bit unique. I battled with the state of Florida on this a bit, and I said, well, how is this calculated exactly? And they continued to tell me that it was based a lot on just how they were calculating other things, such as years of service and all of this. And then they also trickled in there that they calculated on age. And I said, so if I retired, 30 years later, but I still had the 8 years of service. So let's say that I just started working at age 60 and I worked till 68. Well, would I get a higher payout? And they're like, well, yes, based on this. But they couldn't give me all the numbers. Because I'm like, well, that doesn't even make sense to me. So I'm just telling you the calculations will vary drastically. Oftentimes they're going to say, well, it's based on an algorithm and blah, 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 blah. Sometimes this is where it gets confusing, even more confusing, I guess. Sometimes some companies, the way they base this is based on interest rates. They're going to sit there and calculate your pension lump sum based on interest rates, and the higher the interest rate could mean a lower payout versus a lower interest rate could mean a higher payout. It seems to be the most confusing thing. There are some things that the IRS shows as far as tables that could help with this, though it gets confusing. So what did I do here in the year 2025? I said, hey, I'm going to put this in AI and I'm going to let them give me an example. Tell me in the comments if this example makes any sense or not to you. Hopefully it does, though. I think that it makes a little bit of sense, though, we're using dollars and blocks here. So it says, the person giving you the blocks says, since the blocks don't grow very fast over time, I need to give you a lot now so it's fair. That's if you have a lower interest rate, like 2%. So you get the 100 blocks today. The higher interest rate, though, like a 7%, the person says, since blocks grow really fast, I don't need to give you as many right now because you'll be worth more later. So they only give you 70 blocks at that time. Now, again, kind of confusing on the way this all works out. The baseline is that it seems as though the higher interest rate, they're saying your dollars will go farther. You could get more return on your money there. There's some discrepancies when you look this up as to really why this is, how this all works. Though I'm just wanting to forewarn you that if you're looking to retire, be sure that you're keeping up with these interest rates. You're asking your HR department and the people calculating that, because that is something that could come into play and potentially give you less money if you go with a lump sum route. And finally, tax liability. Tax liability is huge when it comes to retirement years and focusing on getting a pension and seeing what you have to live on. Pensions are taxed oftentimes as you receive the income. Pensions are totally different than something such as VA benefits that are tax-free. So just know, just because you're getting something that is coming in on a regular basis, almost always an actual pension is going to be taxed. Lump sums are often tax deferred. So the reason that is that they're going to, let's just say that you're going to get $1 million lump sum. Well, you could take these dollars, you could take it all at once, pay all the taxes. I would never suggest doing that because you're going to bump into some of the highest tax brackets. But what you could do is roll that into an IRA account. That could allow you to even do tax strategy, tax planning later on, such as Roth conversions. You could really play some games with that once you have that into the IRA account. But be careful if you retire before 59 and a half. With the fire department, we had the ability to keep the money in the Florida State retirement system as a lump sum. If we were to do that and work with it in there, we had the ability to sometimes access those dollars if you'd retired after a certain mark, though if you rolled it into an IRA, you had to wait until the 59 and a half. And so there's some really finicky rules depending on where you're coming from, what you're doing, that you're going to want to make sure that you're looking at with this. Now, one thing we really want to focus on here, though, is the RMD. Because if you have, let's say, a pension coming in, let's just give the example of the firefighter. They put all of their money in a 457. So they have this 457 retirement account as well as a pension. Well, if all of their dollars are tax deferred, when the RMD hits later on in life, if they don't need those dollars in the early years, the required minimum distribution is going to push them into much higher tax brackets, because the pension is going to really keep you at a pretty steady tax bracket. Let's say, again, you're only getting that $50,000 and you're getting it every single year. And then you may have Social Security that kicks in on top of that. If you're not touching your dollars, they continue to grow. They're all tax deferred. At, let's say, age 75 is in this scenario here, you're looking at starting to creep up in the tax brackets. But eventually, as you can see, this mountain continues to grow. And that is because the older you get, the more they make you take out. And that's how the RMDs are going to work. So make sure that you're, again, planning for this. You could do some tax planning, some tax strategy to factor in things. Consider Roth accounts to make sure that you're avoiding this, or Roth conversions later on. Those are all just different factors to come up with when it comes to the pension. There are tons of others. I could go on about this for years. So let me know in the comments if this video was helpful, or if you have any other things that you'd want me to touch on when it comes to the pension.